Have you ever wondered what they feel when you stop looking for them? You've been reaching out, trying to connect, trying to get their attention, but what happens when you finally take a step back and let them feel the absence of your presence? Hold up, before you scroll, let me ask you this. What if the key to making someone miss you is not by chasing them, but by letting them chase you? It's time to flip the script. The world tells you to keep going, keep pursuing, keep trying to please, to be the one to always reach out. But let me tell you something, it's the quiet moments, the pauses in the conversation, the spaces in time that truly make them realize what they've been missing. When you stop looking for them, that's when they start looking for you. You're not just doing this to make them miss you for the sake of ego. This is about self-respect. It's about knowing your worth and understanding that you deserve someone who will give back as much as you put in. And let me tell you, that power isn't in your constant reach outs, it's in your decision to walk away when the connection isn't mutual. Absence is a powerful tool, one that most people fail to understand. When you're always present, always available, you risk becoming a part of the background. Your presence may be taken for granted, and the emotional weight you carry may diminish over time. But when you step back, when you remove yourself from the equation, you create a void and emotional gap that demands to be filled. This absence forces others to reflect on the value of what they had and what they may lose. It gives them the space to truly appreciate your worth, something they couldn't do while you were constantly within their reach. This power doesn't come from manipulation, it comes from self-respect. When you choose to create distance, you're not doing it to punish anyone, but rather to assert your own value. People can't truly understand how important someone is until they no longer have access to them. Absence gives them the chance to miss you, to feel the void you leave behind, and to realize the emotional significance of your presence in their life. It's not about playing games, it's about recognizing that your time, energy, and attention are valuable. What's even more fascinating is how absence can spark curiosity and desire. Humans are naturally drawn to what they perceive as scarce or unattainable. The more you remove yourself, the more they begin to wonder what you're doing, where you are, and why you've stopped reaching out. This curiosity builds attraction, and soon, the very person who took you for granted will start to seek you out. Your absence becomes an invisible force, pulling them back in, making them question their priorities and realize just how much they miss you. For far too long, many of us fall into the trap of always being the one who chases. Whether it's in relationships, friendships, or even professional interactions, we often find ourselves constantly reaching out, seeking validation, and putting in all the effort to keep the connection alive. But in doing so, we lose power. The dynamic is unbalanced, and we become the ones who are dependent on the other's attention and approval. This dynamic is not only exhausting, but it also devalues our self-worth because we're constantly giving without receiving. Reversing this dynamic means taking control of the situation by shifting the power back to yourself. It begins the moment you stop seeking the approval and validation of others. When you stop chasing, you force a change in the relationship dynamic. Suddenly, they're the ones wondering why you're no longer so available. This shift not only repositions you as the one with the power, but also forces the other person to reevaluate their behavior. They'll begin to feel the difference, and this will make them reconsider their level of investment in the relationship. When you stop reaching out, you don't lose anything, you gain respect and autonomy. The more you pull back, the more the other person has to step up if they truly want your attention. By no longer chasing, you've taken away the option for the other person to take you for granted. Now, they must decide whether they are willing to put in the effort to reconnect with you. It's a clear shift in energy. Instead of you being the one doing all the work, they must now come to you, reestablish the connection, and prove their desire for your presence. Emotional gaps are the spaces that form when two people are not fully connected or when one person withholds emotional investment. These gaps are not physical, they are the unseen rifts that create distance, tension, and uncertainty. When you stop reaching out to someone, whether intentionally or out of necessity, an emotional void is created. This void makes both people feel the absence of the connection, but it particularly forces the person who has been used to your attention to recognize what is missing. Without these emotional exchanges, they are left to reflect on the significance of the bond they once had. When you're always available, you may inadvertently fill every emotional gap for the other person. But when you remove yourself, those gaps become pronounced, forcing them to feel the weight of that absence. The emotional gaps are powerful because they give people the time and space to evaluate what they truly want and need. Often, when you're constantly present, the emotional connection becomes diluted, and neither person can see the true depth of what's at stake. But the moment you step back, those gaps highlight the emotional dependency and create room for deeper reflection. What's crucial about understanding emotional gaps is realizing that they are not just a sign of loss, but a signal for growth. The gap itself isn't something to be feared or avoided. It serves as a powerful tool for both people to gain clarity on their feelings, their needs, and their priorities. The absence allows for a deeper appreciation of the connection, one that is often overlooked in the hustle of constant communication. This emotional gap not only helps others realize what they are missing, but it also gives you the space to rediscover your own value outside of the relationship, strengthening your sense of self. Self-respect is the foundation of any healthy relationship, and it begins with knowing your own worth. When you value yourself, you don't need to seek constant validation or attention from others to feel significant. Self-respect is the ability to set clear boundaries, recognizing that your time, energy, and emotions are precious. When you understand your value, you no longer allow others to take you for granted or treat you as if you are always available for their convenience. Setting boundaries isn't about being distant or cold, it's about protecting your peace and ensuring that you're treated with the same respect you offer to others. Boundaries are the invisible lines we draw to safeguard our emotional well-being. They prevent people from taking more than they give, ensuring a balanced and respectful dynamic. Without boundaries, relationships can become one-sided, where you're constantly giving and never receiving. When you stop seeking someone's attention and start prioritizing your own needs, you enforce boundaries that allow you to maintain your self-respect. This action speaks louder than words, signaling that you are not desperate for anyone's approval, and that you expect equal effort in return for the connection you offer. What many fail to realize is that boundaries are not meant to push people away, but to create space for mutual respect. When you establish and maintain boundaries, you're teaching others how to treat you. It's an act of self-love that communicates, I am worthy of respect, and I won't settle for less. The more you honor your own boundaries, the more you show that you value yourself, which naturally leads to others respecting you as well. By doing this, you not only protect your emotional health, but also create a dynamic where the other person must rise to meet you, otherwise they risk losing your presence altogether. Curiosity is a powerful force in human relationships, one that can ignite interest and reawaken feelings that have faded. When you're always available, always predictable, there's no room for mystery, and the connection can become stagnant. But when you step back, when you stop constantly reaching out, you create a space where curiosity begins to take root. People wonder where you are, what you're doing, and why you're not as accessible as you once were. That simple act of pulling away causes them to question things they may have taken for granted, and curiosity drives them to seek answers. Curiosity thrives on uncertainty. When you withdraw your emotional investment, you introduce an element of unpredictability. This unpredictability can spark a desire to know more, to understand what's happening with you. Humans are naturally inclined to fill in the gaps when information is missing. By withholding your attention, you leave them with an emotional puzzle to solve. What are you doing without them? Why aren't you contacting them as often? These questions start to swirl, making them more attuned to your absence and the impact it has on their lives. The key to creating curiosity is not to play games or be manipulative, but to give people the opportunity to reflect and desire more. The moment you stop seeking them out, you flip the script. They become the ones who need to make an effort, who need to ask themselves why they haven't heard from you. This space forces them to acknowledge the significance of your presence in their life, and the longer you remain silent, the deeper the curiosity grows. What was once familiar and taken for granted now feels intriguing, and that's when the dynamic shifts in your favor. Distance is often viewed negatively. as something that separates us from the people we care about. However, distance, when applied strategically, can be an incredibly empowering tool. Stepping back from a relationship, whether emotional, personal, or professional, gives you the opportunity to reclaim your own power. By creating space between yourself and others, you take control of the dynamic instead of letting it be dictated by someone else's actions or expectations. Distance allows you to focus on your own growth, to rediscover what truly matters to you, and to reconnect with your own purpose without being clouded by outside influences. The power in distance comes from the clarity it provides. When you're always close, always involved, it's easy to lose sight of your own needs, desires, and boundaries. But when you step away, you're able to gain perspective. You stop being reactive and start being proactive. Distance gives you the space to observe, reflect, and analyze situations from a place of calm and self-awareness. It helps you see who truly values your presence, who is putting in the effort, and who is just along for the ride. This clarity allows you to make more informed decisions and set better boundaries moving forward. Empowering yourself through distance also involves rediscovering your own strength. It's easy to become emotionally dependent on others for validation, but when you pull away, you begin to realize that you can stand on your own. You start to find your own voice again, free from the need for constant approval or attention. This independence is liberating, and it reminds you that your worth is not tied to anyone else's presence. The distance you create is not a sign of weakness, but a powerful declaration that you can thrive without being constantly tethered to others. It's about taking your life into your own hands and ensuring that your emotional well-being is your responsibility, not anyone else's. The law of scarcity is based on a simple yet powerful principle. People tend to value what they believe is rare or in limited supply. When something is abundant and always available, it loses its perceived worth. This is why, when you stop constantly reaching out or being available, you create a sense of rarity. Your presence becomes something they have to actively seek, which makes it more valuable. When you're always around, there's no urgency, no real appreciation for the connection. But when you create a sense of distance, suddenly your time, attention, and affection become something they need to earn. And that drives up its perceived value. Scarcity isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about understanding human psychology and using it to your advantage. When you stop giving so freely, you cause others to take a step back and reflect on how much they took your availability for granted. The less you give, the more they want. The law of scarcity works because it taps into the basic human desire for what is hard to get. By reducing the frequency of your interactions, you make them work harder to regain your attention, which can reignite a desire that may have faded when you were too accessible. In relationships, whether personal or professional, scarcity creates a shift in how others perceive your value. It forces them to recognize that you are not someone they can take for granted or assume will always be there. When you create distance, you indirectly raise your worth in their eyes. The longer you maintain this distance, the more they begin to realize just how much they've come to rely on you. The scarcity of your presence creates a heightened sense of longing, making them more likely to appreciate you and work harder to maintain the connection. Silent strength is the power that comes from being calm, composed, and unwavering without needing to prove anything. It's the ability to stand firm in your own identity and values without shouting for attention or validation. When you stop chasing after someone's approval, when you choose silence over constant engagement, you are exhibiting silent strength. This quiet resilience comes from a place of self-assurance, where your confidence doesn't need to be flaunted or voiced. People can feel the strength of your presence, even in your silence, because it speaks volumes about your self-worth and emotional maturity. The beauty of silent strength is that it doesn't rely on external circumstances or the reactions of others. It comes from within, and it's not shaken by what others do or don't do. When you create distance, you are not reacting out of desperation or insecurity. You are acting with purpose and understanding. This strength isn't about being rigid or unapproachable. It's about having the power to remain calm in the face of uncertainty and emotional chaos. By choosing silence, you create an emotional space that allows you to remain steady, unaffected by the highs and lows that often come with constant engagement or emotional turmoil. What makes silent strength so impactful is that it makes others take notice without you having to say a word. When you step back, others feel the absence of your presence and the calmness in your approach. They sense your ability to remain grounded, which makes them see you as someone who commands respect and attention. Silent strength creates an aura of mystery and authority. People are drawn to that quiet power because it shows them that you don't need to fight for their attention or approval. Your mere presence, unspoken and unflinching, is enough to earn it. The psychology of attraction is deeply rooted in human behavior and emotions, and it's often driven by factors like mystery, challenge, and perceived value. One of the most powerful principles behind attraction is the idea of the chase. When you're always available and constantly seeking someone's attention, the dynamic becomes predictable and the attraction begins to fade. People are naturally drawn to what they perceive as a challenge. By pulling back and not constantly pursuing, you tap into the primal instinct of wanting what feels elusive or out of reach. The absence of your presence triggers a desire to close the gap, sparking curiosity and, in turn, reigniting attraction. The more you withdraw emotionally, the more you create a sense of scarcity, which increases your perceived value. When someone feels they might lose something, their attraction to it intensifies. This concept is supported by the psychology of scarcity. What's harder to get becomes more desirable. By stepping back and not constantly vying for attention, you create a space where the other person begins to wonder what they are missing. The longer you hold this distance, the more your presence becomes something they desire to regain, as they begin to see you as valuable and worth pursuing. The psychology behind attraction is also tied to the concept of emotional investment. When you stop chasing, the other person is forced to invest more emotionally to get your attention. The imbalance created by your absence makes them realize that the relationship is no longer just something they can take for granted. The pursuit now on their end becomes an emotional investment that sparks deeper feelings and enhances attraction. People are often drawn to what makes them work harder for it, and when you stop looking for them, you make them realize that they have to work to keep the connection alive. Your worth is not tied to how frequently someone seeks you out or how much attention you give. It doesn't decrease when you stop chasing after someone or when you create distance. In fact, true worth lies in knowing that you are valuable regardless of external validation or the presence of others. When you stop seeking constant approval or engagement, you take a stand for your own intrinsic value. You affirm that your worth is not determined by anyone else's recognition, but by your own self-respect, principles, and understanding of who you are. This internal value remains steadfast, unaffected by the actions of those around you. When you make the conscious choice to step back and focus on your own life, it's not an act of diminishing your value, it's a sign that you understand your own power. People may come and go, but your worth doesn't fluctuate based on the availability or attention of others. By setting boundaries and not constantly chasing after someone, you are demonstrating the strength to stand firm in your own identity. This decision isn't about rejecting others, it's about reinforcing that your emotional energy and time are precious, and they should be respected and valued just as much as your presence is. In relationships, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that your worth is defined by how much someone needs you, but that's a dangerous illusion. Your worth is independent of anyone else's actions or attention, and it's in the moments when you choose to prioritize yourself that this truth becomes evident. When you create space, you allow the other person to see that you aren't desperate for their attention. You are valuable because you know who you are, and you aren't willing to lower your standards to gain validation. Your worth does not diminish when you stop looking for others, it only grows stronger because you become the one who sets the terms of how you are treated.